morning and welcome to our Bible study for, we're recording this on a Monday, but this will be viewed on Thursday, January the 6th. We are going to highlight different people of faith, and today and next week we are going to talk about Joshua. And we know that Joshua is the one who took over the leadership of the Israelites after Moses' death. Now the people of Israel, and you will see on the map that we'll show you in just a moment, have traveled from Egypt around the desert of Sinai, which today is mostly Saudi Arabia, and then they have been moving towards the land of Canaan, which is Israel today, and they are going through what is today Jordan, and then they stop at Madaba, M-A-D-A-B-A, which is where Moses gets a view across the valley from the hilltop there to see the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, and then the land that God has promised. And so there is where Moses dies and Joshua begins, because he's the one who will lead the people of Israel across. So we are going to read Joshua chapters 1 through 3, portions of them, to talk about Joshua taking leadership, Joshua sending spies into the land to scope things out, and then also Joshua leading the people across the river. And we will talk about that in just a little bit. Next week, we'll talk about the Battle of Jericho and Joshua's role. So let's begin with a word of prayer. Lord, we thank you for people of faith who've gone before us, and help us today to learn from the life of Joshua and from his leadership of the Israelites. Amen. Joshua chapter 1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people, get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give to them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. The key here, God is saying, I will give you these places. This is a gift from God. Verse 4, your territory will extend from the desert in the south to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Remember that God's covenant was to Abraham, who lived for a while, who lived in the land, Isaac, then Jacob, and then of course his sons and their families all ended up in Egypt. And they've been in Egypt and then now in the Sinai desert, and now they're coming back to the land that God had promised. And Joshua is the leader. So the Lord continues to tell Joshua, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. He repeats that from before. Do not be afraid. Now those 4 words are repeated in the Bible in many places. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So those 9 verses is God's speaking to Joshua and letting him know that he will be with him just as he was with, the Lord will be with him just as the Lord was with Moses. So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God has given you for your own. Now, chapter 2 tells about Joshua sending spies ahead to see what he was going to be dealing with once they crossed the river. So let's take a minute and talk about the city of Jericho. They're crossing the Jordan, where the first group of people they will run into will be the people of the city of Jericho. Jericho, according to archaeologists, is at least the oldest known city that they have found record of in the world. They have gone back to, there were people living in that area about 12,000 years ago. Archaeologists have found for about 11,000 years ago, there were a group of buildings and they were surrounded by a wall that was a couple meters thick and about 3 or 5 meters high. And this is the earliest known evidence of people actually living in what you could definitely say was a city that was organized. A city meant that people that used to grow crops for themselves are grouped together. And so a few people have to be the ones who store crops, who provide for the necessary things that people need in a city. Jericho, it may not be the only one in the world or the first one in the world, but it's the oldest that we have archaeological evidence of. And it has been occupied consistently in that area, at least. There's been a city of Jericho for thousands of years. So here in Joshua's time, the city had already been there for several thousand years. It was a walled city. It was an organized city, and it was probably the strongest in that area at Joshua's time. And you may see a depiction of Jericho that is there that you'll see in your video in a moment. And it just shows some of what the archaeologists have found. The picture there shows 2 walls. It would have been the inner city with the smaller walls that would have been there around Joshua's time, but it did later grow into be a larger city. And there's also a photo that shows what they have reconstructed that gives you an idea of the gate to the walls that are there today. There's a little sign or a placard on the wall that gives you an idea about what's the height of a person. And that'll show you a little bit of what the wall might have looked like at the time of Joshua. So, chapter 2. Then Joshua, the son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. That's the little place where they were camping. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there in Jericho. Now, I think it's interesting. Why did these 2 spies go to the house of a prostitute? Maybe there's 2 theories in my mind. Number one is that as people traveled, that was perhaps a place where travelers and visitors might stop, and so they hoped to try to blend in with the other men who were part of the travel in and out of the city and were there at the house of prostitution. The other theory is that they made that for their benefit and they stayed there. And I don't know why, but if they were trying to hide, it didn't work, because verse 2 says, the king of Jericho was told, look, some of those Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. Now they knew the Israelites were camped 30 or 40 miles away. It wasn't that far away. They had heard, the Jericho people had heard about them. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab, who was the woman who ran the house of prostitution. The king said, "Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land." But the woman had taken the two men and hid them. Now, why did she do that? We don't know. She was used by the Lord to help the spies, and she protected them, and she was rewarded for that. So back here it says, so the woman tells the king a story. She says, "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they came from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly, you may catch up with them." Verse 6 says, "But she had really taken them up on the roof and hid them under the stalks of flax that she had laid out on the roof." It was pretty common that roofs of flat roofs were used to dry out flax and other things, the weed or whatever out on the roof. The roofs might be a place where people might sleep in warm weather because there was a breeze. The roofs were used. So she had hidden the spies on the roof. But the men from the king followed her direction. They followed her dodge. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Because you always close the city gate at night, because that was their protection. Verse 15, Rahab let the spies down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. She said to them, "Go to the hills so the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until they return, and then go on your way." Now, I've skipped a few verses for time reason, but part of Rahab asked that they protect her when they did come and invade the city. And so they promised to make sure that she was rewarded, and that did happen. We'll read about that next week. So verse 22, when the spies left, they went into the hills, because the others went down in the valley, and stayed in the hills 3 days until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the two men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, that's the Jordan River, and came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." So people are already fearful. Of course, the Israelites were a large group. Remember, when they left Egypt, there were 600,000 men plus women and children, and I can't imagine it would be a smaller group 40 years later. So here, chapter 3, we go back to what the Israelites are doing before they get to Jericho. Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. So they camped on the shore. It's going to take all day for them all to cross that Jordan River. After 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people. "When you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, and the Levitical priests carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it." And you'll see there's a picture, an artist drawing of priests carrying the ark. The ark is covered, but the priests are holding onto the poles in order to carry the ark. You weren't allowed to touch the ark. So they are going to go to the River Jordan, carrying the Ark of the Covenant. The ark contains the 10 Commandments, some manna, as an example, manna from the wilderness, And I think the staff of Moses was in there too, if I'm correct. So they tell the people, then you'll know which way to go, since you've never been this way before. But keep a distance from the priests and the ark of about 2,000 cubits between you and the ark. Do not go near it. Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow. The Lord will do amazing things among you. They don't know what they're going to see. Joshua told the priests, take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on ahead of the people. So they took it up and went ahead of them. And the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so that they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. So Joshua will really be seen as the leader. Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river. Joshua said to the Israelites, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites, all those different tribes. See, the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of all the earth, the Lord of all the earth, remember that, will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Now then, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. And as soon as the priests who carry the Ark of the Lord of all the earth, sets foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap. This is parallel to what the Lord did to bring the Israelites out of Egypt when they crossed the Red Sea, and God parted the waters so they could travel safely on dry land. And then, of course, made the waters come back when Egypt's army came. Here, as they're going into the promised land, God is going to stop the river and allow them to cross on dry land. Verse 14. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is at flood stage all during the harvest. Let me stop for a minute. The Jordan River, in my humble opinion, is not that impressive. But I grew up in Florida near the Manatee River in Tampa Bay, and the Manatee River may be shallow, but it's about a mile wide. The Jordan River is not anywhere near that wide. However, like any other river or any other place, when you have large amounts of water coming down, say in the springtime, when the snow-capped mountains up north had melted and that water is flowing, then it doesn't have to be, more than 50 or 100 feet wide to be a dangerous river. And that is exactly what's true here. The Jordan was at its flood stage, and so there was lots of water and it was swift, and crossing could be dangerous. So as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Edom in the vicinity of Zarethan. So they named the town where that water piled up. While the water flowing down below them to the Sea of the Arabah, which is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan, on that dry land, and stood on dry ground while all of Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. So every single person passed by the Ark of the Covenant being held by the priests in the middle of what was the Jordan River, but was just a dry creek bed at that point. And another example of how God kept reminding the people that many of the things that happened to them or that they accomplished were not of their own, but that they were the Lord, and the Lord provided. So here, they all passed by and saw clearly that it was Joshua's commands to the priests, and the priest in the Ark of the Covenant, that stood up the Jordan River so that they could cross. Well, that must have been a great encouragement, a statement of faith, that what they were doing, this journey they were embarking on, was truly a journey that was guided by the Lord, and that Joshua was the one who was a trusted leader. So that's a bit about Joshua. We'll learn a little bit more about Joshua himself and his family next week when we read about the Battle of Jericho. Thank you. And God bless you.